There is a massive inflation crisis beginning in North America that not very many citizens are aware of yet. I will tell you all about it, right now. I ask that you listen all the way to the end to avoid misinterpretation. Consumers in the United States are becoming increasingly aware of the effects of inflation as more news about rising prices hits the headlines every day. Many of these reports, on the other hand, do not accurately portray the true gravity of the situation. And this is taking place because the rate of inflation is still in the single digits or higher at the time of the official publication. However, what most people in the United States are not aware of is that government agencies have significantly altered the way inflation is calculated in recent years. In fact, according to a recent Forbes article, the government has changed the way it calculates inflation more than 20 times over the course of the last 30 years. The majority of economists believe that these adjustments are a convenient way to achieve favorable results, despite the fact that there is no way to accurately estimate how much of that rate is being concealed. The truth is that, due to a lack of transparency, the rate of inflation has a direct impact on a wide range of sectors of the financial system and the economy. The government has a vested interest in keeping that figure as low as reasonably possible. And in order to accomplish this, they tweaked the formula until they found one that produced the results they desired. However, even with the new, readjusted formula, inflation rates have continued to rise steadily, setting record highs after record highs in the process. This is the latest reading of the Consumer Price Index, also known as the CPI, which measures changes in the cost of living, food costs, groceries, and housing costs. Economists had predicted a rise of 4.7% in prices from the previous year's reading. Additionally, this was the largest CPI increase since 5.3% in 2012. The rate was first recorded in August of 2008, according to the data. And of course, many of us don't remember them as they were when they happened. What transpired in the months that followed the events of August 2008? The United States was hit by a devastating financial crisis, which sent the economy into the worst recession it had experienced since World War II. At this point, all we can hope is that the same thing will not happen again. Another major source of concern is the fact that, despite the fact that inflation readings are significantly higher than they have been since the financial crisis of 2008 and 2009, the Federal Reserve has chosen to ignore the most recent data. Investors, on the other hand, remain intensely focused on inflation, which has posed the greatest threat to the U.S. economy since the early 1980s and continues to do so. Given that official statistics do not accurately reflect the true scope of the problem, it is safe to assume that consumer prices are rising at a rate greater than 5% at the moment in question. According to John Williams of ShadowStats.com, if inflation rates were calculated the way they were back in 1990, the figures would be significantly higher than 8%. When measured the same way as it was back in 1980, inflation would be approximately 13% at the time of writing this article. In the face of such staggering numbers, it's understandable that government agencies would try to conceal the truth about the situation. It's true that the 5% inflation rate sounds a whole lot more appealing than the 13% inflation rate. However, no matter how hard they try, they will never be able to conceal it. The effects of inflation can be seen everywhere, but they are most noticeable in the price of food. Americans have noticed a significant increase in the cost of food at their local grocery store. According to a recent article by a CBS affiliate, an increasing number of grocery shoppers are experiencing sticker shock as the cost of food, particularly meat, fruits, and vegetables, continues to rise dramatically. If prices were really rising at a 5% annual rate, consumers would not be experiencing such severe consequences just yet. Unfortunately, the reality is far worse than the appearance. The food has been hidden from view. It is, in fact, true. It's increasingly impossible for some shoppers to continue to afford these prices. According to a recent interview with CBS News, a participant expressed concern about the rapid rise in fruit prices. "I noticed some apples. They were $2.19 per pound at the time. You'll get 2 apples for your trouble. That is completely absurd." The same thing is happening to the price of meat. A deli owner and meat wholesaler claims that the price of meat is out of control and that the actual inflation rate for meat is much higher than what is reported by government agencies. On the national news, they reported that the figure was 10%. However, this is not the case. In the opinion of an associate professor of economics, the figure is closer to 20 or 30%. This is a clear indication that the economy is overheating, contrary to what our policymakers have been arguing for a long time. This is not a fad that will fade away. Despite the fact that inflation will continue to rise, consumers will find it even more difficult to keep up with rising prices. When you realize that this may be a longer-term problem than we had anticipated, it may be too late to combat the situation. In other words, the longer the Federal Reserve continues to ignore this problem, the greater the likelihood that it will deteriorate into a major national crisis. According to another shopper who was also interviewed by CBS, she has been noticing a rise in her grocery bill since the beginning of the year, and that she is now spending approximately twice as much on groceries as she did a year ago. A typical Maryland resident spends approximately $75 per week on groceries. However, her bill has increased to at least $150, if not more, due to the fact that raw juice, eggs, meat, and bread are all more expensive now than they were previously. As a result, she and her family had to reevaluate their financial situation, she explained. "It means that we won't be able to purchase many of the things that we desire, as previously stated." In another interview, a 29-year-old wildlife biologist will most likely not travel as much as before, and we will not purchase any new clothes for him. Despite the fact that we will be returning to the office in a few weeks, millions of American families are experiencing the dollar and cent realities of higher inflation, just as the rest of the world is. It was only a few years ago that a full shopping cart of groceries would have cost approximately $35. If anyone can get a full cart of food for less than $175 today, they are considered to have accomplished something significant. It's becoming more and more difficult to take advantage of sales and stretch every dollar as far as it possibly can be stretched. Some of the prices are actually significantly more expensive than they were previously. This is occurring as a result of some businesses figuring out how to raise prices without alarming customers. Following the recent increase in global commodity prices, a large number of these businesses are being forced to pass along the increased costs to their clients. In order to manage shoppers' expectations, food manufacturers and grocers are turning to shrinkflation, a practice in which they package food in smaller containers while charging the same price as before. A number of others have attempted to use language that will not elicit widespread alarm. According to reports, if you ask Pampers maker Procter & Gamble, they will tell you that they are not raising prices, but rather that they are taking prices instead. Unilever, the company that makes Dove soap and Axe body spray, claims to have been extremely active in terms of pricing. Home improvement retailer Lowe's, whose finance chief told investors on Wednesday that the company was elevating our pricing ecosystem, according to the report, has borne the cost of innovation so far in the form of higher prices. Executives at General Mills are also resorting to absurd euphemisms in order to justify the company's latest price increases. There are arcane phrases like strategic revenue management and holistic margin management in the new jargon, which is not the kind of language you'd expect to find on the back of a box of Lucky Jobs. According to reports, the company uses those terms so frequently that its CEO now refers to them by the acronyms SRM and HMM, rather than by their full names. And the reality is that, with corn prices surging and the threat of widespread crop failures looming, consumers should brace themselves for significantly higher cereal prices in the coming weeks and months. All of those indirect terms, such as rising prices, draw attention to the rhetorical backflips that businesses engage in order to avoid exposing what they are actually doing, which is responding to skyrocketing inflation in global markets while protecting their profit margins by increasing the cost of their products. At this point, we have massive piles of money chasing after a small number of goods and services, if any. As a result, prices have nowhere else to go but up. Our leaders, on the other hand, should be concentrating on implementing emergency measures to prevent an inflationary collapse. Instead, they've implemented policies that appear to be making the situation worse. Our money supply will be significantly increased as a result of the new administration's proposed $2 trillion spending plan, which will further erode our purchasing power. To try to mitigate the impact of yet another spending bill, a group of U.S. senators is putting together a so-called compromise deal that would only provide $1.2 trillion in new infrastructure spending. This will obviously make little difference when we consider the trillions upon trillions of dollars that we have already borrowed and spent as a result of the current financial crisis. What they're doing is simply unsustainable, and it appears to be complete and utter madness. It is, in my opinion, irresponsible to harm the economy of the world's wealthiest superpower by any means. However, our politicians and policymakers are unconcerned about the potential dangers, and they will continue to borrow and spend massive amounts of money that we do not have, while the Federal Reserve continues to pump mountains of cash into the financial system, at an unprecedented rate. As a result, we can anticipate even more painful inflation in the future. Furthermore, the standard of living for the majority of Americans will continue to decline. So there you have it. Thank you for listening, and click on our next video for even more interesting economic and financial news. Watch all of our videos, we take pride in bringing you the very best. I will see you in the next video. As always, my name is Mr. Smart Money, reminding you to stay smart with your money. Click our next video right now.